Imagine this, a ragged peasant boy in the dusty hills of Hunan province, barefoot in the rice paddies, dodging his father's bamboo rod while secretly devouring books about emperors, rebels, and distant revolutions under the flicker of an oil lamp. Fast forward half a century, and that same boy stands atop Tiananmen Gate on October 1, 1949, proclaiming the birth of the People's Republic of China to a sea of cheering millions, his voice crackling over loudspeakers as the red flag rises. "The Chinese people have stood up," he declares. But behind those words lay a trail of calculated alliances, bloody uprisings, epic marches, and merciless purges that turned a humble farmer's son into the unchallenged chairman who ruled 1/5 of humanity with an iron fist. Power, Mao would later say, grows out of the barrel of a gun, and he proved it ruthlessly. Welcome to the untold story of Mao Zedong's astonishing rise, drawn from his own interviews in Edgar Snow's Red Star over China, declassified archives, biographies like Zheng Chang's Mao, the Unknown Story, and Alexander Pansov's Mao, the Real Story, and historical news reports from the era. This is no fairy tale of destiny, it's a masterclass in revolutionary cunning, ideological obsession. Imagine this. A ragged peasant boy in the dusty hills of Hunan province, barefoot in the rice paddies, dodging his father's bamboo rod while secretly devouring books about emperors, rebels, and distant revolutions under the flicker of an oil lamp. Fast forward half a century, and that same boy stands atop Tiananmen Gate on October 1, 1949, proclaiming the birth of the People's Republic of China to a sea of cheering millions, his voice crackling over loudspeakers as the red flag rises. "The Chinese people have stood up," he declares. But behind those words lay a trail of calculated alliances, bloody uprisings, epic marches, and merciless purges that turned a humble farmer's son into the unchallenged chairman who ruled 1/5 of humanity with an iron fist. Power, Mao would later say, grows out of the barrel of a gun, and he proved it ruthlessly. Welcome to the untold story of Mao Zedong's astonishing rise, drawn from his own interviews in Edgar Snow's Red Star over China, declassified archives, biographies like Zheng Chang's Mao, the Unknown Story, and Alexander Pansov's Mao, the Real Story, and historical news reports from the era. This is no fairy tale of destiny, it's a masterclass in revolutionary cunning, ideological obsession, and the human cost of absolute power. Stick around for the full 45 minutes as we unpack how a peasant seized China and what it cost the world. Born on December 26, 1893, in the tiny village of Shaoshan, Hunan, Mao Zedong entered a world still ruled by the decaying Qing dynasty, where peasants like his family scraped by on rice fields in Confucian duty. His father, Mao Yicheng, was a stern, relatively prosperous farmer who lent money at high interest and demanded absolute obedience. His mother, Wen Qimei, a devout Buddhist, offered the only softness in a household marked by beatings and endless labor. Mao later told Edgar Snow in those Yan'an cave interviews that as a child he rebelled fiercely, once running away after a particularly harsh whipping, only to be dragged back by relatives. At 13, he refused an arranged marriage to Lo Yishu, a local girl he never lived with, calling the feudal custom barbaric. He worked the fields by day, but devoured Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Water Margin, and Western thinkers like Adam Smith, Darwin, and Rousseau by night, fueling a burning nationalism against foreign imperialists carving up China after the Opium Wars. School in Shaoshan and later Dongshan exposed him to bullying over his thick peasant accent, yet it also sparked his first political stirrings. The 1911 Qinghai Revolution that toppled the emperor thrilled the 17-year-old Mao. He cut off his queue, the long braids symbolizing Manchu rule, enlisted briefly as a soldier in Changsha, but quit when the fighting fizzled into warlord chaos. Poverty forced him through odd jobs and short stints at police, law, and economic schools before he landed at the Hunan First Normal School in 1913, where mentor Yang Chongji introduced him to the radical magazine New Youth and the anti-imperialist fervor of the May 4th movement in 1919. That year, as Versailles Treaty handed German concessions in China to Japan, Mao organized student strikes in Changsha, edited the Shang River Review, and co-founded the renovation of the People's Study Society with friends like Kai Hessen. He worked as a librarian's assistant in Beijing's Peking University, rubbing shoulders with future CCP founders Li Daqiao and Chen Duxiu, who fed him Marxist ideas amid the excitement of the Bolshevik Revolution. By 1920, married to Yang Kai-hui, daughter of his beloved professor, Mao was no longer just a restless intellectual, he was a full-throated revolutionary, organizing miners' strikes in Anwan and teaching at a self-study university, blending Confucian roots with Leninist fire. As he later confided to Snow, those early years forged his belief that peasants, not urban workers alone, held the key to China's salvation.
The struggles that forged Mao's rise were forged in fire and betrayal, a decade of near-death escapes, ideological knife fights, and guerrilla genius that turned a handful of intellectuals into a peasant army capable of toppling empires. In July 1921, Mao attended the first Chinese Communist Party Congress in Shanghai, smuggled aboard a boat on South Lake after police raids, becoming one of just 12 founding delegates. But the CCP was tiny and fractured. Comintern orders forced an uneasy alliance with Sun Yat-sen's Kuomintang, where Mao rose as propaganda chief and ran the Peasant Movement Training Institute in Guangzhou, training thousands in land reform tactics. His 1927 report on an investigation of the peasant movement in Hunan was explosive, defending violent peasant uprisings against landlords as necessary. "A revolution is not a dinner party," he wrote. When Chiang Kai-shek turned on the communists in the 1927 Shanghai massacre, slaughtering thousands, Mao launched the Autumn Harvest Uprising in Hunan, only to watch it collapse under superior nationalist firepower. He fled to the Jinggang Mountains with a ragtag force, linking up with Zhu De's troops to form the Fourth Red Army. There, in the rugged borderlands, Mao pioneered his signature guerrilla tactics. The enemy advances, we retreat. The enemy halts, we harass. The enemy tires, we attack. The enemy retreats, we pursue, while redistributing land and building Soviets. Expelled temporarily from the CCP for military opportunism, he clawed back power through sheer will and battlefield success. By 1930, the Jiangxi Soviet was a thriving red base of millions, but Chiang's encirclement campaigns forced the epic Long March in October 1934. Over 86,000 communists, including women and children, set out on a 6,000-mile trek across rivers, mountains, and enemy lines. Only about 7,000 survived the snows of Jiajin Mountain, the rope bridge crossing at Luding, and constant aerial bombing. At the Zunyi Conference in January 1935, Mao outmaneuvered rivals like Bo Gu and Zhang Gutao, emerging as de facto leader. Edgar Snow later captured the mythic aura in Red Star over China, quoting Mao's laconic reflections on the march as a declaration of our determination that inspired the world. In the Yan'an Caves from 1935 onward, Mao consolidated through the rectification movement, purging dogmatists while marrying He Zijian after Yang Kai-hui's execution by nationalists in 1930. He courted Western journalists, charmed the United States with anti-Japanese unity during the 1937 to 1945 war, and grew the People's Liberation Army to nearly 1 million. The final civil war from 1946 to 1949 was brutal. Mao's forces outmaneuvered Chiang's American-backed army through mobile warfare, capturing Beijing and forcing the nationalists to Taiwan. On October 1, 1949, from Tiananmen, Mao stood triumphant, but his rise had already claimed hundreds of thousands in land reforms and executions, ruthlessness masked as revolutionary justice. Mao's peak as chairman was a dizzying blend of visionary transformation and catastrophic hubris, where his word became law, his face adorned every wall, and policies unleashed famine, chaos, and purges that historians estimate cost tens of millions of lives. As PRC chairman and CCP leader from 1949, he launched land reform that executed or imprisoned up to 1 million landlords in public struggle sessions, redistributing fields to peasants in a wave of class vengeance. The Korean War in 1950 cemented his anti-imperialist credentials, with Chinese volunteers fighting the U.S. to a stalemate. But cracks appeared. The 1957 100 Flowers campaign encouraged criticism, only for the anti-rightist campaign to label 550,000 intellectuals as enemies and send them to labor camps.
Mao's greatest gamble came in 1958 with the Great Leap Forward. Backyard steel furnaces, communal kitchens, and impossible grain quotas meant to catapult China past Britain in 15 years. It is better to let half the people die, he reportedly told cadres, according to internal records later cited in Frank Dickator's Mao's Great Famine, so that the other half can eat their fill. Reality was apocalypse. Falsified harvests, grain exports amid shortages, and brutal enforcement led to the deadliest famine in history. Historians drawing from provincial archives, including Dickator, Yang Jishang's tombstone, and Pontsov's research, place the toll between 15 and 45 million dead from starvation, violence, and disease between 1958 and 1962, more than World War I's battlefield deaths. Mao retreated temporarily, allowing Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping to restore order, but he struck back in 1966 with the Cultural Revolution, declaring war on capitalist roaders in the party. Millions of Red Guards, teenagers wielding his little red book, rampaged across China, denouncing teachers, parents, and officials in public humiliations, beatings, and executions. Rivals like Liu Shaoqi were tortured to death. Pang Dehua, hero of the Korean War, was purged for questioning the leap. Mao's third wife, Jiang Qing, and the Gang of Four fanned the flames, while Lin Biao, once his chosen successor, died in a mysterious 1971 plane crash after allegedly plotting a coup. By Mao's death on September 9, 1976, at age 82, the body count from the Cultural Revolution alone reached hundreds of thousands to 2 million, per eyewitness accounts and post-Mao investigations. Personal controversies swirled too. Mao's multiple marriages, rumored affairs, and a personality cult that turned him into a living god, complete with mandatory study sessions and badges. News archives from the era and Snow's earlier interviews reveal a man who justified every excess as necessary for perpetual revolution, even as his health failed and China teetered. Mao's legacy remains a fractured mirror. Revered in China as the father who unified a shattered nation, ended foreign domination, boosted literacy from 20% to over 80%, and laid foundations for industrialization, yet condemned globally and quietly critiqued at home for the human catastrophe he unleashed. Official CCP verdict, set by Deng Xiaoping in 1981, claims Mao was 70% right and 30% wrong. Credit for founding the PRC and early triumphs, blame for the leap and revolution as serious mistakes. Today, in modern China under Xi Jinping, Mao's portrait still looms over Tiananmen, his image on banknotes, yet textbooks soften the famines as natural disasters, while emphasizing his peasant roots and anti-imperialist defiance. Western historians, armed with archives opened after 1978 and survivor testimonies in books like Mao, The Unknown Story, paint a darker portrait, a ruthless dictator whose ideological zeal trumped reality, whose purges echoed Stalin's, and whose cult stifled dissent for decades. Yet lessons echo far beyond China. Mao showed how a determined outsider can harness peasant anger and nationalist fury to topple empires, but also the peril of unchecked power fused with utopian fantasy, how one man's vision can starve nations and shatter societies. In an age of strongmen and ideological fervor, his story warns that revolutions devour their children, and that serving the people can mask serving only the throne. As Mao himself told Snow in Yan'an, reflecting on his improbable journey, all the victories of the Chinese Communist Party were won under the banner of Mao Zedong thought. That thought remade China, at a price still being tallied. What would you have done in his sandals? Compromise or charge forward with the gun? History doesn't forgive easily, but it demands we remember. Thanks for watching this deep dive. If it sparked your curiosity about power and revolution, hit like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts below. What's the biggest lesson from Mao's ruthless rise? See you in the next one.